What I have for you today is a match that was sent to me over on the official Brightworks Discord channel. Link will be down below in the description, as well as a link to Lincraft Designs, where you can save 15% on your offer by using code Brightworks. As well, there's the Twitch link down there in case you want to check out whenever I go live on Twitch. Usually is on Thursdays, but sometimes other days of the week. This is a match that was submitted by a viewer like you for a little bit of a review, a little bit of a intriguing decision was made here. And today it's going to be played on All That Glitters. Spawning in the southern section and representing the blue team as a Cortex commander with that big old orange pumpkin on his head. It's Sun Tzu writing his famous Art of War, apparently live for us. Gonna be showing us how it's done, I suppose, on this All That Glitters match. This is a bit of a lower true skill lobby. However, a lot of these players do have a couple of chevrons under their belt, so I'm still expecting big things out of all of them. However, I can't help but notice that this lab is already backwards and we are off to a very thematic start. Spawning all the way across the map here as the red team leader, it's going to be Thunderhawk 270, not 2070, 270. I've been playing Cyberpunk 2077 over on the Twitch channel, Brightworks TV, in case you want to watch the playthrough of that. But Thunderhawk 270 instead here, going to be an Armada commander wearing that witch's hat and wielding that witch's broom and showing us how it's done here on the red team. I can't help but notice exactly opposite spawn here for the blue and the red player. So both of them in the tech position here, which is quite funny. That's oftentimes where we see either a full-blown greedy tech build or we see a support tech build where you're sort of going for T2 and distributing it to as many of the other players around you as possible. It's a very central location, right? So oftentimes we see that's the choice that these commanders go for. One thing that we need to get out immediately, though, is constructors here, and I like what Sun Tzu is doing. Getting the constructor out here to eat up all these metal extractors, I think, is probably the number one thing that you should use that constructor for immediately. Making sure that you get these 1.8 metal extractors up and running as soon as possible, definitely very crucial to your survival, especially on All That Glitters. All That Glitters is a map all about expanding outwards, right? You have to make sure that you're claiming wide swaths of area in order to have a secure hold over the map, as well as have a secure economy on the map. And, well, another helpful bit is reclaiming here, which I do notice the yellow player is doing a great job of. Has a bunch of ticks falling around this resbot here to eat up any metal that might be out there. Fortunately for the yellow player, no forces out quite yet for Kazork, although they are getting there here and there. Yeah, the grunts are headed towards the resbot here. It's going to be a matter of whether JT Win 25 notices in time or not. Don't think so. Resbot is going to go down. The grunts are also going to flash down a couple of those ticks. And I think that's going to be all she wrote here for the yellow player. Would have liked that a whole lot better if we could preserve the resbot there and use it in the later game, but still, losing a single resbot and a couple of ticks, not the end of the world, but definitely just a little bit of a nick in the economy. Captain Dabs and Its Dome pushing up right alongside Ringbolt. Everybody kind of pushing in unison, and I really like to see that. Oftentimes what we'll see is one or two players push up really aggressively. Say this player goes to here, and this player goes to here, and then this player only goes to here, and then you have this lopsided front line, right? And then it allows for more pressure to leak in from this direction, more pressure to leak out from this direction. People run right up the middle, and then everybody is distributing force, but essentially its dome will collapse backwards in this direction. And then there's more on this side. This is getting very hectic now, but you can see how the line folds back, and eventually everybody comes up to even, but it's much easier if all the commanders are just expanding at the same time, right? It keeps it very, very well-paced. Bunch of rovers thrown to their death here. Not sure I like that move. Could have understood if maybe we were trying to go for the commander snipe, but that's not really what happened right there. Those rovers just drove right up to this LLT, maybe to try and shut that down, but it will come up in time as the commander blasts down those rovers. And Ando going to be, not Mando, but Ando 67 going to be securing a nice little front line here. No metal to be spoken of, though. Yeah, we need these metal extractors. I think that commander paid for this extremely fast front line by missing out on a whole bunch of metal extractors. There is a constructor eventually going to build these up again. Well, for the first time, I suppose. But yeah, it's especially when you're going vehicles, it's really important that you get those metal extractors. Nice Rocketeer control over here, helping out Monkaz. Or Monka-Ez. Monka-Z. Some sort of helicopter flying over my house right now, too. Hope that's not too audibly disturbing. This is nice. This is what we really need to see, especially on these lanes. This is what I like to see all the time, but especially on All That Glitters in this lane right here. We need to see both players working together to push out this front line. If you can push this front line back to this point right here, and you have this nice big open concave, it can actually make it really, really easy to hold right here, and it allows you to go for an incredible amount of static defense, and you can pork it up quite nicely. If you fall backwards, however, into this choke point over here, these three, you suddenly have to deal with a much more difficult hold, and especially it's doubly so if your teammate doesn't push up and hold this line as well. Similar engagement over on this side. Salmonman's just doing a great job of engaging over on this side, using whatever grunts are available. I believe these were the grunts of Ringbot. Yeah, the maroon color on their armor plating. Lying in ruin here on the bottom of all that glitters here. There's a 3.2 metal extractor right here, which is quite valuable, and I think Salmonman's definitely needs to grab that as soon as possible. Putting up these laser towers is nice, but once you have one or two of them up, you need to start thinking about going for that metal extractor. This LLT right here is pretty much the reason why not, I do believe. Yeah, a lot of Rocketeers. Oh, okay, so this is really nice. JT-Win25, the yellow player who was helping out the orange, has shared over the Rocketeers, just giving them to the orange player who is already busy microing on the front, and I think that's a really nice move. If you notice that you're spending too much time microing units instead of going for your eco, which is essentially what the yellow player is supposed to be doing back here, it's never a bad idea to just hand those units off to whichever teammate is going to be microing on that front line regardless. Sometimes people complain about that, but it really does make a whole lot more sense. Just, you know, if they ask you not to, then I guess try your best not to, but otherwise, typically it ends up working out in the whole team's benefit here. Rocketeer's a little bunched up. I'd like to see these spread out a little more. Resbot from the early game could also patch a whole lot of these up. Just hit the R key. R is in, oh, I lost my phonetics thing. R is in Romeo, that's right. Sorry, I was looking behind me. It's over on the floor. Fell off my wall a little while ago. R is in Romeo. To repair up these units right here, you just drag a big repair circle on that Resbot. We'll go about patching up all those units, mending their woes and worries, and yeah, getting them ship-shape for the front lines again. Pretty good against these Lashers here. Lashers are very slow, so Rocketeers can't actually jump on top of them. It's weird to say that Rocketeers can jump on top of anything. Rocketeers not the pinnacle of speed either. However, it's all a matter of perspective, right? And Rocketeers definitely outpace the Lashers. But once the Lashers get up to speed, they definitely can start to do critical amounts of damage just over time, right? They slowly whittle down forces left and right, and it becomes a game of attrition, really. So Ando has done a great job of fortifying this line right here. And this is a convex as opposed to a concave, so I would have liked to seen these turrets established more like this as opposed to like this. But either way, it's not really the end of the world. Having the turrets there is much more important than, you know, the shape of them. All right, well, not always, but the shape of them can definitely help, but having them there is better than not having them there. Loads of artillery are being pumped out here. There's tons of LOTs as well. Yeah, those blitzes were thinking about jumping on top of it, but they realized there's tons of grunt support. Yeah, these Shell Shocker are now blasting down everything over here for Salmonman's, as well as Galactic Ascension, both of which working together on this front line. Excellent teamwork, but there's not a lot you can do once those artillery trucks come out. Yep, they're just going to start bombarding everything over here. Heavy Laser Tower even comes up here for Ringbolt, and Ringbolt is completely committed to keeping the green players in their box. Just doesn't want to let them out, just want to keep them contained inside their little area, and on one hand, that's not a bad idea, but on the other hand, it can be a little bit of a problem, right? If you let them have free reign over their box, oftentimes what they can do is just go for a crazy greed, and then come out of that box with T3. You're left behind in the dust, T2, maybe early T3, and that could be a really huge problem. Yeah, so these pink trucks were coming out of a T2 lab, or out of a T1 lab rather, in the back line. We're now going up to T2 for Crazy 2 net, which is pretty good. A little bit late on the T2 transition, but of course that's because the units were pumped out here, so hard to say that that's really a late transition. It was like a anti-timing, right? We decided to make it a little bit later by going for a little bit of aggression on the front lines. Can't say I hate the idea at all. I think it's probably pretty good. Pounders are out now to deal with a lot of this spam force, like these grunts that are set on a patrol path right here. This is quite nice queuing, actually. Setting a bunch of units on patrol paths. I usually like to see the patrol path a little bigger, just to make sure that they're not falling under artillery, but it does help because when artillery targets them, they'll obviously fire where the unit is, not where the unit's going, and that can, yeah, that can help your units survive dumbfire artillery siege for quite a bit longer. Single Lasher is out now for Monka, and yeah, well, actually we've got a couple of them. Just one of them is on the front lines here. I think those need to start building up in number and harassing down whatever they can. You can definitely start to do quite a lot of damage here, but you might notice we are 2 versus 1 right now, as Ando and Kazork both are going up against this player. And that's because Captain Dabs has forwarded up back here with 2 gauntlets. Oh my good lord. We are going for quite a lot of T1 defense back here. We must have a 5 minutes no aggression pact or something like that. 2 players versus, well, essentially 1 player. I mean, there are the forces of the yellow over here. The yellow player has also got some skin in this game. They're just handed over to the orange player, but still, this is a lot more units here for the blue team than there are for the orange. These pounders, man, very dangerous. Huge amount of damage potential. Ooh, do we have any lashers in reserve? Oh, no lashers held in reserve means those shuriken are going to get an excellent paralyzation off here. Going to shut down a whole lot of these units, allow some of these rocketeers here for our light blue player Kazork to move the well, those agitators in, aggravators rather. Always getting those 2 mixed up. Big old rocket bot fight. Pounder having a field day over here though, firing away at whatever it can. Tons of AoE on its little snozzle cannon, so it can definitely do quite a bit of damage. Still though, those missile trucks, this is exactly what I was talking about. You build them up in enough number and there's just not really anything you can do. They start to whittle you down from so far away that it's impossible to really deal with them. That being said, these medium tanks are exactly where they want to be, right on top of the missile trucks. You just can't let them get away. Well, that flame turret over here is definitely going to help though. All said and done, fairly even trade. There's now T2 out on the field. We do see hounds being handed over to the orange player from the yellow player. Lasher is out now, and it's going to be very useful for shutting down the shuriken. Nicely done. Light anti-air tower was thrown up as well by Munkos, just to make sure that there's no cheeky shuriken plays again. Captain Dabs is definitely way behind the line. Well, sort of way behind the line. He's only a little bit behind Ringbolt across the map here. A fair amount behind its dome. But definitely way behind his orange counterparts over here. So there's this massive opening in the orange armor plating right now. And I think our blue player has sort of spotted it. As you can see, there's a massive path where you can just run units through. In fact, that's not even the best path. You could actually run them right through this path over here, directly into the backline of the red team. These are a bunch of fiends. Usually the first T2 unit that we see on the field for Cortex players. If not this, then the Sheldon, but this is a very common one. And they're quite tough. They do quite a lot of damage per second. However, they also are not impervious. They're not impossible to shut down, but you're not really going to get a very efficient trade if they manage to jump on top of a T1 army. Grunts do a decent job just because they can kite, and if you spread them out and you get a good surround, you can do a decent amount of damage, but still, it's never going to be perfectly efficient. Rocket Spider was built out here. Rocket Spider doesn't seem like it, but it's a very effective siege weapon. It can fire from quite a distance. You can see that red outlined field right there of fire that it can achieve. Very, very long-ranged rocket bot there. And oftentimes I feel like I discount how important or how impactful those rocket bots can be. So we've got a big old bombing run coming out as well here from our pink player. Link74 has decided it's time to pull the trigger. Gonna send the fighters in, accompanying the bombers here. We do have well, there was a scout plane. I think it might have been shot down by now. Sending in the fighters first to make sure that the fighter screen of the enemy is knocked out, or at the very least pierced, and then the bombers come in here. Bombing run was able to take out a couple of windmills, not able to take out the build power though. I wouldn't mind seeing these double back to try and maybe get the wind turbines there. Oh, a little bit of retargeting makes these bombers a little bit self-conscious. They have to dive out and then dip back in. Fighters now coming in. Oh, but I think it's a little too late. The bombers have already dropped their payload. Kind of. Well, they missed a lot of it. Okay, didn't get the fusion reactor, did pop just about everything else that was surrounding it, though. That is all right for Narek. At the very least, Narek doesn't have to rebuild that fusion reactor. That's a lot of energy coming back into the bank right now. It's going to be very useful to have that up and online here. Nicely done by the fighters, by the way. There's multiple people contributing fighters. We do see the blue player making fighters, as well as the powder blue player making fighters, so that's quite nice. Always useful to have a little bit extra air just held in reserve for any bombers that might leak through or something like that. Oh, beautiful connection with that rocket spider right there. He retreats back up the mountain for safety. Well, I guess not. Was definitely thinking about it. Yeah, you can always just tell this thing to climb back up the mountain, right? And then it goes and hides on top, and it can't really be found all too easily. It's an interesting option. Heavy laser tower was built up here on the front to sort of secure the line, but frankly, I think the T2 hounds are going to do a lot better job of that than the heavy laser tower will. Despite the heavy laser tower being, well, heavy, it is still a T1 defense, and those T2 are basically designed to break through those. Still T1 here for Kazork, though. I wonder if we didn't get a T2 handed out. It's quite surprising. Yeah, I don't see a T2 handed out here. At the very least, I can't see it for Kazork. Definitely one of those things you want to do as soon as you have your T2 lab up is let your team know that you have a T2 lab up so that everybody can get T2 as soon as they need it. Oftentimes that can be the determinant of who wins one of these battles, is who manages to propagate T2 through their team first. It's a simple gesture, but just offering to build someone a T2 can oftentimes be a really, really nice way to boost their economy. Fiends jumping on top of all this. They shut down those build towers that were set up over here, and they're jumping on top of the Fiends too. Eventually they're going to be cleaned up by some Hounds in Gauss mode. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just blind here. Either way, another big engagement over here on the other side of the map. Grunts rolling in like a tide, sweeping across the forces here of the purple player. Fiends actually doing a little bit of friendly fire damage, yeah. No pun intended. Shell Shocker now diving even. That's a bit odd. Definitely not their intended role. Easy to throw away your T1 when you feel like it's no longer getting value, but it's important to try and trade it as effectively as you can. It gets harder and harder as you get into that T2 stage, but throwing away units definitely is not the ideal solution here. Going for a lot of static defense out here in the middle of the map. Essentially, everybody is containing everybody else here. There's gauntlets all over the place. We've got one here for eco boost. We've got two agitators over here for its dome. We've got two gauntlets over here as well for Captain Dabs. Everybody and their mother has decided that the gauntlet is the new wave. Yeah, I mean, these Hounds are going to have a great time tearing apart these thugs. That's a very tasty trade for those Hounds. Shuriken, however, gonna have a field day as well. Messing around with those Hounds. Paralyzing them wherever he can. You can certainly make an effective trade out of anything when the Shuriken get involved. Yep, there they go. Jump on top of the Hounds and it means that the thugs can start firing away. Fiends as well, sure. Jump on top of all that, and that's a really nice move here. So we're seeing the effects of 3 versus 1, right? Like, the Hounds are getting as efficient a trade as possible, but there's just not enough massive units here. And that's not really something you can change other than ecoing as hard as you humanly can. And that's oftentimes the downfall of many commanders, is they eco too hard, suddenly they're left without units here. So what I'm hoping to see is that the yellow player is going for a little bit of eco. At the very least, there's a lot of windmills back here, so that's producing a nice amount of energy. T2 is up. Yeah, we are just now getting T2. Very, very late T2, especially for the amount of reclaim that's out here. Also, we've had this T2 lab for quite a while. Usually, if it's not your first unit, you definitely want to get that T2 constructor out pretty much as soon as you can. It's almost always going to be really valuable to hold on to that. Big tank run by was attempted over here, but as you can see, it ran nowhere. It ran out of steam. That's where the ran by went. And now there's a whole lot of tanks being resurrected and turned into forces here for the maroon player. I'm gonna go ahead and turn up the speed here, as it looks like the front lines are starting to stagnate, meaning that it's time to see who goes for some sort of killer play. Looks like Thunderhawk has decided to go into mass butler here. Yeah. All right, we're going up to 41 butlers and counting. More and more of them coming out every second. It's an interesting strategy because it does allow you a whole lot of mobile build power, so you can do things like this. You can run over here and put that together, and you can run back over here and put this together. You just kind of throw resources around wherever those butlers go. At this point, I think I would probably use them to eat up one of these fusion reactors and start feeding that metal into the advanced fusion reactor. Probably a good idea here. Gauntlets in high arc trajectory means they're not really going to be very effective against these fiends, which do now swarm through the middle of the map. Okay, good job to the blue player, Sun Tzu here, realizing that there's a massive weakness in Captain Dab's defenses, as there's no point defense. It's all artillery pieces. And that will be Captain Dab's commander going down to a couple of fiends, almost killing the T2 lab, but not quite. As well as a gauntlet going down there. Yeah, I mean, why are we not leaning on that? That definitely seems like where we should keep our pressure the highest. I do like this spy bot out here giving guidance for the long-range rockets of this rocket spider over here. Quite nice. Okay, yeah, there we go. This is exactly what we need to see. Fiends just need to start running through the map. They can just start pushing and applying pressure right here to Captain Dabs, who is one true skill, so taking it a little easy on him. But yeah, applying pressure where the defenses are certainly the weakest. Gauntlets are confusing, right? They're very expensive, and they have a big gun, which makes you think they're probably the pinnacle of defensive structures, but the reality of it is all those T1 structures work mostly in unison, right? You need them in perfect harmony in order to work most effectively. So much friendly fire right here from these artillery pieces. Loads of friendly fire from those artillery pieces, actually. Well, this is a mess. T1 vehicles galore. At the very least, we do have the Mauser in the back to reign over our own forces. But yeah, that was a very messy engagement. We're essentially banking on the age-old adage of more stuff beats less stuff, and indeed, I do believe it's going to be the Maroon player here who just has more stuff. Going to be able to break through this line, firing away at whatever was tucked over in this corner. There's a couple of energy converters and some solar panels and whatnot. Samamon's commander going to move forward as a last-ditch attempt here. Oh, he's actually going to take out a significant portion of that army, but also blows apart a huge portion of his own. And now the Mauser are free to roam on in. Now they do need that vision support here, right? So this Thug and this Pounder are actually a crucial component of this army. Ooh, and they're getting friendly fired like it's nobody's business. EcoBoost will pull his forces, including some T1, some T2 Jaguars, as well as some T1. There's amphibious tanks in there for some reason. It's an interesting decision. Ooh, Shuriken are pulled as well to deal with this. I was wondering how we're going to clean all this up, and it looks like the answer is going to be Shuriken. Of course, very powerful as far as very efficient trades go. Pretty much turn any trade into an efficient trade. I like this as well. We do have some construction bots eating up all the wreckage here for Sun Tzu. That's very nice. Using his air power to actually leverage it into some sort of an advantage. Yeah, not bad. Fighter's gonna have a field day shooting all those down, as well as the Shuriken here. Those Nighthawks are T2, and they mean business. Not gonna be able to stand up to 50 T1 planes, but still very powerful. Pressure has ceased right here in the middle of the map, which is quite odd. T2 production is still in full swing for Captain Dabs, although not a lot of build power. I would definitely love to see a couple of these construction turrets coming up in a nice row, nice box. Get a little bit more build power under your belt. Speaking of build power, it's a lot of it. Yeah, you can see the butlers have a really huge build range. If I just select one of these, you can see that green circle is how far away the butler can build from, and it is actually a significant range. Yeah, you actually can move these in quite a dense clump here to build a whole lot of build power. If we're looking at 140 build power per, somebody in the comments can do the math. How many build power? How much build power we have in total here, and whether it's more or less efficient than going for construction turrets. I don't think so. It's more expensive in energy. No, sorry, slightly less expensive in energy for slightly less build power. I think it's a little bit less efficient, but of course it can move around all over the place. So you can build here, you can build there, especially if you need to put up some expensive T2 turrets or anything like that across the field. Definitely allows you to do that with some sort of a little bit less vulnerability, right? You don't have to go out there with a whole bunch of air constructors, which is another potent choice, or you don't have to go out there with maybe a whole bunch of build turrets that you transport over there with the air transports. Fiend's now looking for as good an engagement as they can find, and jumping on top of a bunch of Sheldon is pretty good. Yep, that's a pretty nifty trade. They're going to be happy to blast down all of those long-ranged shell spitters. Shell slingers. Shell throwers. Sheldoners. I'm getting a bit carried away here, but other than that, I think it's probably a pretty good trade. Those Fiends probably pretty happy to trade out for Sheldon. Sheldon definitely start to spiral once they get into the higher numbers, and hitting that spiral is tricky, but once it happens, they're pretty much set. So for that reason, I'm pretty sure that the blue player is pretty satisfied with shutting down that spiral earlier on than trying to deal with that later on when it's just a rain of Sheldon fire coming down upon you at all times. Full-blown T3 production is up and running here for the red players. Going into some of those Thors. Thors are very instrumental in this battle, and on any battlefield where it's just flat open terrain. Oh, that was a nice LRPC shot. There's an LRPC somewhere over here. I'm not even sure where it is. Oh, there it is. Basilica red over here. firing away at whatever it can. Yeah, that's a heavy cannon it fires. It's very, very powerful. Can definitely snipe some key structures with that bad boy, so good to see that coming out here. Not very expensive either. 4,500. I mean, relative to T2 defenses, that's not too much more expensive than, say, a rattlesnake or a persecutor. Big clash of the armies over here, though. Fiends finally pulling the trigger here and starting to run by. They're headed directly for the base of Captain Dabs. Does Captain Dabs have enough forces? I believe the answer is no. We've got a single bull out right now, and that will be burned down pretty quick here, but the Thor is now available, as well as a whole bunch of shuriken to try and clean this up. So with the assistance of that heavy lightning tank and those light paralyzer drones, I think these fiends are going to be cleaned up quite nicely. But man, what a scary army to have knocking on your door with no units. At this point, Captain Dabs has got to be wondering what on earth he can do to get the economy up and running. This is quite nice. We've got 2 fusion reactors as well as 2 energy converters. I think what we want to go for right now is 2 more energy converters and then all the advanced metal extractors you can afford to make. I'd love to see these 2 upgraded back here as well as these 3 up on the fronts. Definitely try and secure as many of those as possible here. Anyways, I'm raving on about that while there's an active battlefield going on. We do have a whole bunch of hounds, supported by their grunts, actually. That's a pretty killer combo. Grunts are very cheap, and they have quite a bit of line of sight, making them a very good scouting unit, of course. That's their purpose, or one of their purposes anyway, is the Cortex scouting unit. But they accompany the hound quite nicely here, just because the hound has quite a tremendous effective firing range and quite a low vision range. It can't really see nearly as far as it can shoot, meaning that if you accompany it with basically anything that can see out pretty far, you're going to have hounds that are nearly twice as effective, I would say. Fat Boy in a lot of trouble here does go down to the overwhelming firepower of the Fiend. Every time I say firepower in relation to the Fiend, it feels like it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, right? Sharpshooters now jumped on by Fiends, and that is expensive. Sharpshooters aren't a whole lot of metal. They're 680 metal, but they're 20,000 energy apiece, which is just a hefty price to pay. Not to mention they cost $1,000 per shot, or 1,000 energy rather, per shot, in order for them to loose their cannon of war. As powerful as it may be, it is certainly an expensive one. A plasma cannon continuing to fire away over here. Captain Dabs has gone for a plasma shield. Interesting. Welder's trying to leak out of this side. For the most part, though, they're getting blasted to smithereens. There's no radar bots to protect these, protect these spy bots here. So unfortunately, they're just going to get blasted apart. Only a couple of them managed to fire. I think it was about 4 or 5 of them managed to let loose their shots. And all said and done, that is not a very effective connection. Yeah, that was a really expensive army for green right now going down. And there's not really much left on the line. There's more sharpshooters building up back here. There's a whole lot of T1 army building up over here, but none of that is particularly effective against T2. We do have some nice EMP missiles over here, connecting with a lot of T1 as well as some T2. Those lightning tanks firing away at whatever they can. They jump on top of the pulsars. Pulsars can't really retreat. Very similarly to those siege units, if they turn around, they can't really turn their heads around as well. It was a nice catch with these Thors, but I think we need to pull them out of here. You definitely don't want to lose your Thors. They're very expensive to put together, and they're very bulky, so repairing them makes a whole lot of sense. There's a lot of health to be repaired, so you might as well. What I'd like to see is one of these pulled back here. Just send this one back to the lab, have all those butlers patch it back up again, and then have the other healthy-looking one moving on forward here. Starlight's going down to the Thors, though. That's very nice. One of the Thors does go down. Quakers trying their very best, but yeah, these Thors, I mean, they're hard to stop. EcoBoost Commander does not cloak here. And that's going to be a commander going down as well as the T3 lab over here. Dragon is out to try and deal with this. Not the worst counter I've ever seen, but certainly a slow one. It's going to be blasting off a percent or two every couple of seconds. Not the quickest solution to a very, very high HP unit heading directly towards the base. I would argue sharpshooters and starlights are probably the right decision. Of course, all those got bursted apart just mere moments ago. We need to target the advanced fusion reactor here. You hit the T button in order, the Y button in order to target. I mix those controls up. I always have them backwards, but yeah, you hit the Y button in order to target. Yep, and there we go. We see the advanced fusion reactor here popping for EcoBoost as the Thor does get just a little bit too close to the main base. Thor's not done yet either. Oh, never mind. Sun Tzu comes in for the D gun. Very nice. Gonna clean that up a little bit too late to save his teammate, but at the very least going to prevent any further damage. T1 units were all sacrificed right here in the middle of the map. We were watching the T3, and the Sheldon had a field day picking them apart. This is what I'm talking about. Those Sheldon start to spiral, and once they hit critical numbers, they really can be quite a pain. A bunch of rascals are now running around all over the place out here, and that can actually be very dangerous for the player that's wielding these rocket bots, right? These arbiters. Those rovers or rascals or ticks or any of those scout units get a little too close to your own units, and suddenly you find yourself with a few less units. Yeah. The sharpshooter march has begun, though. This is a dangerous one. Every time those sharpshooter guns click, you know that you're losing a unit, or at the very least losing a whole lot of health on a unit, in the best case. Doesn't matter if it's sumos, mammoths, arbiters, Shiva, razorbacks, anything. Those sharpshooters will click their guns away at whatever they can. Fiend's jumping on top of this, though, and that's a pretty ideal solution. Yep, gonna burn down a whole lot of those sharpshooters, and there just wasn't enough welders in front to soak up all of that fire. Welders are pretty much the counter to Fiends. They're a weird counter because they're more expensive and harder to maneuver, making them a they don't feel as easy to use as Fiends. However, if you have enough of them, they can certainly shut down Fiends with a tremendous efficiency, just because of their chain reaction as well as their their relatively high DPS. I wouldn't call it a high DPS, though. I'd say welders are probably one of the lower DPS units there is, actually. All these units from yellow now handed over to orange. It's quite funny that we keep doing that. Orange, you can see the like a little in between orange commanding them and yellow commanding them. I like it though. Like I appreciate that we're handing over the units, but maybe the better idea is to build up big waves of units in the back and then hand those over to orange so that he can pretend as if they're reinforcements coming out of a lab rather than just trying to position the units that are already out on the field. Usually that ends up working out just a little bit smoother. It's a good idea with just a slightly suboptimal execution here. Yeah. Over on this side, the mouse are looking to sneak through. They're having a tough time right now. What are they firing at? For some reason, these Mauser are just laying down the law, firing on whatever they can over here. A couple of sharpshooters, sure. There they go. Spy bots are out now. We're gonna self-D. Self-destruct. Self-destruct. Oh, there we go. All right, that's pretty good connection. Yep, manages to self-destruct right on top of all these Mauser. Oh, that one got really deep in there. Wow, that was a really good self-destruct right there, paralyzing almost every single one of these Mauser. Very nicely done. There's a big run-by of incisors over here, those light laser tanks for the Cortex faction. But now there are sharpshooters and welders coming out. At the very least, those Mauser have been prolonged a good long time here. I think more and more of those spy bots paralyzing all that would be quite nice. Front lines are crumbling, though. Front lines have crumbled, I should say. There's still a little bit in the back here, but yeah, there's certainly a lot of dead units all over the place. We've all seen just how powerful the Resbot can be, so I wouldn't mind seeing a whole bunch more of those. At this point in the game, it's not too hard to find the funding to pump out 10, 20, maybe 30 Resbots here and there. Eat up a couple of those T2 units, and you're gonna have the money to pump out a whole army of those T1 Resbots, and those T1 Resbots can make you a whole army of T3 from essentially thin air. Just takes energy, but at this point, you should have a fair supply of energy already. Catapult now brought to the front line. This thing needs to be targeted. You have to, or rather, it needs to be controlled. It has to be manually targeted. You don't want to just dumb firing on things because then it will just spray missiles all over the place and it's just as likely to hit your own units as it is to hit the enemy. What you want to do is use it to snipe key structures here. So I want to see it moved a little further forward and start firing on these labs here, the T1 and the T2. We do have a couple of Titans wandering across the map here, and we have a huge incursion of forces over here on this side of the map. Welders and, well, just a whole bunch of stuff engaging all over the place. We have T1 tanks being blasted apart by the sharpshooters in the back here. That's quite nice. These are peeling away tanks one at a time, and we just have to stall for these sharpshooters to work their dark, dark magic. If we have some way to paralyze all this again, I think the T1 could probably deal with those Mauser. However, there's a lot more T1 tanks running on by. They're trying desperately to get into the back line here, and I think there just might be enough incisor to kind of force their way through. There we go. A little bit caught up on the corpses of their fallen brethren, but eventually they do figure it out. They get into the back line and they start poking away at everything back here. They're gonna pop the fusion reactor. They've already popped the build power. They've got a whole lot of damage coming out of their little snozzle nowadays. That's going to be a devastating hit to the dark green economy over here on the right-hand side of the map. Left-hand side is recovering a little bit. We have tons of LRPCs coming up. That's quite funny. Not the ideal solution we've seen, or we usually see. But it is cool, I suppose. Shuriken gonna jump on top of a whole lot of these Mauser over here and shut them down with relative ease. Fat Boy's also getting in on the mix, trying to fire away at all of these Mauser that they can. And overall, taking a really nice trade. I always undercount Fat Boys as just being a little too expensive for their power that they represent, but certainly when you get connections like that, it's hard to pass up on. Shutting down those Mauser with insane efficiency here. The heavy plasma projectile coming out of their long schnozzle is definitely well worth considering with some reverence. Big ball of medium tanks, but you know what does great against a big ball of medium tanks is a big ball of plasma, particularly AoE plasma. Tends to do very, very nicely. Now these catapults also do very nicely against T1. We do have some gunslingers coming out here, but I think the era for the gunslinger is a little bit far past us. Typically gunslingers very powerful against T1 vehicles, T2 bots. Not necessarily what we want to see as we keep this game going, though. Especially once you head into T3, those gunslinger really do lose a lot of their power. Fat Boy doing a lot of friendly fire there, though. It is always a problem that you run into. More so as Cortex than Armada, but it does still exist for the Armada Blue. In this case, the Armada Green. Still, though, quite efficient trade here. And that's all the medium tanks. Done and dusted. There we go. Bunch of flak trucks were just kind of AFK there. If those had spread out and just continued moving forward, you probably could have shot down a whole load of fighters with just the flak coming out of those trucks right there. But unfortunately, not the case right now for the pink player. It's just amassing more and more T1 medium tanks. I really don't like this move. I think that's a little bit of a waste of metal, frankly speaking. There's Ragnarok coming up and running. Not sure if we're going to see that by the end of this game, but it is certainly underway. It's always one option as a end-game scenario, but I feel like we could just have enough to break through here. Titans blasting away at all these fiends that are tickling their feet. Always funny to see Titans dealing with fiends and grunts and whatnot, because it feels so beneath them. Mammoth a little bit sturdier, though. Definitely a little bit better at dealing with these Titans. Shredding off a % or two every couple of shots. Not bad. It's just how efficient these T3 units are, though. And now you can see the Fat Boys firing away at all these uncloaked sharpshooters over here. This Titan's diving. Definitely wants to get some sort of a pick with this Titan right here. And he's chosen a pretty good angle for it. There's not really a whole lot to stop these. Thors are also accompanying this, which is quite nice. We really need some fighter support over here. I think pulling a whole bunch of fighters and sending men would not be a bad idea. It looks like that's the pink player's idea as well. Oh, tick spam over here is great. That's going to be perfect for shutting down these Fat Boys. Yeah, if these aren't manually fired, they are told to manually fire over here. Whoa, big nuclear connection over here. It's like you're just outside of the anti-nuke range there. That's quite nice. Yeah, this Titan kind of breaks the line here. Oh, needs to keep going, though. A little stopped up by these tanks. Needs to keep pushing on through. I'm surprised that Titan is stopped by the tanks. That feels a bit weird. Titan does go down, collapsing all those tanks around it. Thors and another Titan are also moving in here. Do we have a commander to degun all this? We basically need one. The Relics, or the Relics, however you choose to pronounce that. Pretty much the closest Titan I can see. Ando going to be moving in instead, though. Is it too little, too late? Yeah, very well might be. It's too little at the very least for Galactic Ascension, whose base now explodes in a thermonuclear pop, sending shards of what once was Armada technology in every direction here. Down go the famous fat men to the humblest of ticks. As Titans now get into the backline here of the Relics, who is holding on to a solid 60,000 metal, and well, no real way to spend it. Uh-oh. Oh, Commander does go down. All the build power pops, and that is going to be everything right down the drain as we immediately see the entire blue team now overflowing metal as 60,000 worth of metal has just been distributed evenly amongst the entire team. That's, you know, you hoard metal until it's all gone, and then what more can you do? Oh, Thor's gonna be excellent for trading against all this. Oh, they're all grouped up, though. They're all grouped up, though. Killer D-guns by Sun Tzu does manage to save the day as he manages to D-gun down all of the Thors as well as those Titans. Huge dragon wave over here, though. How many dragons are we looking at right now? 11 dragons have been produced here. Those are 5,000 apiece. Just select one of them really quickly. 5,100 metal per dragon. Oh, don't lose them all to the... Ugh, you don't want to lose them all to the advanced fusion reactors popping. That's very expensive. This is a very expensive air raid, but for what it's worth, I mean, they've sniped 2 bases now. Flak is tearing them to shreds, but not quick enough. Poking a ton of tiny little holes inside of all these dragons, but not enough holes yet. Finally, they're all shut down, but man, did it take a while. Ticks are now running into the backline here. They're starting to blast apart this one lone defender who was holding the line. Oh, the Ticks are actually not rallied properly. We need to see these rallied all the way across, trying to get into the backlines of every base over here. More Thors trying to push through here. There's a lot of Quakers firing on them, but Quaker's not an ideal solution against those Thors. No. Ando's commander just chilling. Chilling like a villain, and now he'll be hanging out 6 feet under as all that stands in testament to the commander that once was is 1,250 metal in the shape of a commander's corpse. Shiva are pumped out here. Shiva not great against Thors either. Pretty much you need Juggernauts against Thors. That's kind of where my mind goes. Juggernauts or Behemoths work pretty good too. And we do see Behemoths coming up here. The problem, of course, is that this Thor takes 9,000 metal to build, whereas the Behemoth takes 20,000 metal to build. And you can see the issue there being, of course, you have to pay a steep price to counter a very cheap unit. And, well, it's one of the reasons why the Thor is so powerful. Another commander does go down, and there's still a Thor in the backline. Pops all of the energy converters. Pops another advanced energy converter. And that is going to be all she wrote here for the blue team, as the red Thors do sweep across the map here. Yep, that's quite a lot of butlers. In grand total, we stepped up to 185 butlers. That is just too funny as far as production goes. Pretty funny way of doing things, but I guess it works. It allows you to stay mobile, which is also quite nice. And we can chillax and watch as the fall of the blue team happens right before our very eyes. The last commander goes up in smoke, meaning that the red team manages to capture victory today on this All That Glitters Beyond All Reason match. What a showdown. Hey, thanks a ton for watching, and if you appreciated the video, I'd love if you could leave a like down below. Take the second that it takes. It really helps me out and helps these videos out. Other than that, though, I hope you have a great rest of your day. I do hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you in the very next Beyond All Reason video. Peace out, everybody.